Hey, I'm Jordan. I'm a recovering narcissist. This is Kira, my partner, who was absolutely crucial and key to my healing. And this channel, we are dedicated to educating people about narcissism from the perspective of a narcissist or from a partner who has dealt with the narcissist. And our goal is that we can help people heal, whether you're a narcissist, whether you're recovering from being with a narcissist, or whether you're in the relationship with a narcissist. Our goal is healing. So we hope that you find this video really helpful, because today we are going to talk about lying. Babe, have I ever lied to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been some lying
Tell,
in our relationship.
let them know, what have you been through? What kind of lies have you've had to put up with?
I think from the beginning I could see that you were lying to yourself more than anybody. And that was the first thing I noticed. You know,
Yeah.
you would talk about things in a really interesting way where I was like, "Oh, that's an interesting perspective. I don't know if that's how I see it."
Yeah.
But I've always been flexibly minded, and so I thought maybe there's something I don't know.
Yeah.
And then I would see how you would tell the same stories you told yourself to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so at first I would see the lying or the half-truths, and we can talk about what those are in a minute, with yourself and with other people first. And on some level, I think I knew that would happen between us, but I didn't want to look at it for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
So I think it took a while for me to really start seeing the lies happening between us. Most of all because I didn't want to see them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would say that at first it was a lot of half-truths
Yeah.
instead of blatant lies. And
Sure.
what I mean by half-truths is that half-truths are when somebody basically will tell you most of the truth, but then withhold a little bit of the truth. And it's true enough, right? That if I were to try to call you out on it, you would have a lot of good reasoning for why what you were saying was true. And so that was pretty hard to contend with. So I never did really try to contend with you. Every once in a while I'd poke at it and you would kind of dig your heels in even harder on the idea that we were working with. And so I learned really quickly not to try and poke out anything that didn't feel fully true.
Do you have any examples you want to share?
Not of that specifically.
Okay, sure.
But yeah, so I think a good example of a half-truth, if we're asking for examples,
Sure.
would be saying something like, well, the first one I noticed actually was how you would talk about your divorce.
Yeah.
So I had been divorced before. I knew what it's like in the whole rigmarole. And you would share the story of your divorce with me, very much so painted like you were the victim and had no part in it at all. She was the bad guy. You were a victim.
She
you were
hurt
an angel.
me. She betrayed me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember thinking, there's no way that's true. I know enough about marriage to know it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
And we'll just have to see what your stuff is over time.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting because you would tell these stories about your relationship where you would say, well, you know, I did all these things for her and I did this and that. And then she just out of the blue did this horrible thing to me.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a half-truth because, yes, your ex-wife did do those things to you, but the part you're withholding is what you did to her
Yeah.
for it to get to that place in the relationship.
And I didn't even, and I withheld it from you, but I was also withholding it from myself,
Yeah.
you know, but keep going.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. I used to call them your mental models.
Yeah. You keep really strong mental models.
I didn't want to
AKA, you're
say
lying.
lies. I didn't feel like I was safe to say your lies, but I would say, wow, you have really strong mental models. And to me, that meant really strong stories about the way things are.
Mm-hmm.
And with narcissists, they have such a strong persona that they need to protect.
Yeah.
And I saw that a lot with you. And this is probably why narcissists lie, is because they have learned to build up this persona of who they are that they have to maintain in order not to feel shame or in order to feel acceptable.
Yeah.
And hide who they really are, that vulnerability.
Yeah. So like the story of my divorce was really just another mask that I was held, and I was used to making masks and putting them on, and you know, this was something my body psyche knew how to do.
Yeah. Maybe explain more about what masks are. That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, so I now we're getting to like why narcissists lied to begin with. I mean, at the heart of every narcissist is shame. And most of the time they're raised in a shameful household where whether they were highly criticized or there were standards of perfection or whatever it was, they felt that they were not safe to be themselves. And so they had to exile certain parts of themselves and put forth a version of themselves that was not those things because it wasn't safe to be those things. So it's really, lying is inherent to narcissism because narcissism requires this self-delusion, you know, and we become incredibly good at lying to ourselves. And for me, it was like, I had a mask about how I wasn't actually sensitive. I was really, really tough. I had this storyline about how I wasn't dumb. I was ADHD and I was dumb in some ways, but I was really smart in others. And I had this whole story about how I was never weak. I was extremely strong and nothing could hurt me, you know, and these things just weren't true. Yeah. And I mean, you'd even call out those lies. You'd say, "Oh, did I hurt your feelings? Are you okay?" And I'd be like, "I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine." Like that's like the first lie, you know, and from that perspective, I was lying constantly because I was never connected to what I was really feeling. I was never really connected to my emotions. And so constantly lying.
Yeah, this is reminding me of a funny story, actually, I want to share. So we went on a trip together, and we love to go on long drives when we travel, and we were on a really long drive home from Sedona, I think, and you were telling me about your life vision and all the things you wanted to do in the future. And one of the things you said is, well, you know, I'm super committed to relieving human suffering, and it was something about being very generous. I can't remember the words that were used, but you essentially were telling me this story about how generous you are.
Yeah.
And we had been together for long enough that I felt comfortable to kind of poke at that a little bit, not too much, but I said, "Really? Would you say you're a generous person?" You're like, "Oh yeah, I'm super generous." And I'm like, "I don't really experience you as a super generous person.
Yeah.
Are you sure that that's true?" And we got in a huge fight. You know, you were furious that I had, you know, threatened that mental model of or mask of you being extremely generous.
Yeah.
And you would explain all the things you did that were generous, and I'd say, "But babe, those are things you're doing for you. So that's not generosity."
Yeah.
And we got really deep in this argument, and that was one of many times where I felt this fear of poking those mental models or those masks that you had because you would react really strongly to them being threatened.
Yeah.
Those identities that you're using to protect yourself being threatened or exposed by me.
Yeah.
So it's...
Which occurs subconsciously, by the way. From the perspective of a narcissist, I remember that argument, and I remember even thinking to myself, whoa, I'm disproportionately angry about this. And I think we talked about that. It's like, I can tell that I'm having more anger than is due to what you just said to me, and so this must be pricking something that must have some truth to it. Like I should probably get curious here instead of getting defensive. But yeah, it happens on a subconscious level.
Yeah. So I think that was the early phases of our relationship. As things started to go on, and I'm sure many people can resonate with this, the lies became worse or more, maybe they were more apparent to me just because we had more time together. And one of the biggest things that we struggled with that I think we'll talk about in this discussion, just use this lie as an example because I think it's a good one, is just your pornography addiction.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty big one for us. And what was hard was early on, you would talk about your relationship with porn as, you know, not a big deal, very casual, like not something that was happening all the time. And I think every woman knows that men look at porn, right? Sure. We're not stupid. We're not dumb. Even if men say they don't, we're like, you probably do, you know? So like for me, I was like, he's probably, you know, there's probably more there. But as time went on, it started to feel concerning to me when I felt like you would lie about your relationship to porn.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to get concerned, because I was like, hey, everybody, I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum. I got you. That's understandable that you'd be into that. But the issue for me is that you're lying about it, because that's a red flag for me. Because why would you lie about that?
Totally.
This is a safe place for you to talk about your interests and desires, so why would you lie? And that was where that started, was me kind of asking you, so why didn't you tell me? And you had a lot of excuses and justifications. It would always be like, well, I didn't think I needed to tell you, and I did tell you this, and that's pretty much me telling you. And I was going to tell you, but I was going to tell you after this event because I knew you'd be stressed. And there was just so many like justifications for your lies that that was leaving me feeling very gaslit, because I was like, well, now you're making me feel crazy for suggesting that you not being totally truthful about your habit is a problem.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point, you were saying a lot of things of like attacking me, like, well, you're just insecure and you need to go work on your insecurities, and you need to go work on yourself, and you need to learn to regulate yourself, and you need to, and I was like, wow, I'm the most controlling, most horrible, annoying partner in the world.
Yeah, totally.
He's telling me this shouldn't be a big deal, but everything in my body is telling me that it is a big deal.
Yeah.
And that was a problem that persisted for a long time that we dealt with.
Well, I think this actually tees us up for the question that this whole video is coming from. We take questions from our free online community of people, of narcissists and loved ones of narcissists who are working together to heal. And one of the question that started this is, did you catch your narcissist lying? How did you handle it? Did you feel betrayed? Were you angry? Were you compassionate? So maybe let's talk about that situation, because and how you reacted to this, because pornography was something that I struggled with since I was a kid. Like I came from, or like a teenager, and I came from a very fundamentalist Mormon religious background where pornography was like the worst thing in the world you could do. Like literally they told young women in the church, never marry a man who's ever looked at pornography. Like it was like the kiss of death from the devil at when we were being raised in the church. And so I had this like really shame-based relationship with it, and I had tried everything to try and quit. I'd been to like 12-step groups. This had been a really big issue in my marriage as well. And we had gotten, after I left religion, I'd gotten to the point where the compulsion had like really eased up. It wasn't something that I was like doing compulsively all the time, but I would do it here and there. And I felt in my mind, I was like, I'm not addicted. I remember being addicted. That's not where this is at, And you said, okay, well, then let's have you not do it, And I was like, bet, like I'll not do it.
If you're not addicted, then don't do it.
Yeah. And I'm like, cool, totally won't do it. I'll do it all the rest of this month and all into next month. So like 6 weeks. And at like the day before the end of that, I messed up again. And I'll let you take over the story on how you reacted eventually when you found out.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say that moment specifically was the thing that I want to focus on, but
okay.
For me specifically, it was just the relationship with it. Like, I don't think that the events matter as much as like your relationship to the things that you wanted to lie about.
Yeah. Well, for me, that moment was really impactful. So I do kind of want to talk about it. But I'm open to however you want to take this.
I don't know what you want me to say. So
yeah,
why don't you just talk about it?
Yeah, I'll explain it. Well, yeah, so like with my ex-wife, it was this thing where I had shared little bits of my mistake while we were still Mormon, and it would spiral into this massive fight. And we had this problem of trickle truth where I'd trickle a little bit to her, there'd be this really big blow up, and then I was like, well, if I told her 10%, I can't tell her the whole thing, and I'd hide it. And I remember that I eventually told you about that mistake of going the almost 2 days, and I told you about it, and you reacted with just such empathy and love. Like you were just like, you didn't shame me. You didn't like, oh, you're the worst. Oh, this hurts so bad. Like, and now I know you were hurting, but at the time you weren't like, way to go, buddy. Like you were just like, wow, that hurts. But I'm really grateful you told me. Like you made it a really safe place for me. And yeah, it's like really emotional to think about, because I'd never had that before.
Yeah.
And that was a piece of me that I felt so gross about. And I was so ashamed that this was something that I thought I was done with in childhood. And I thought that it was like not going to come back. Or sorry, not childhood. I thought this was something that had really just been such a pain in my life. And I thought that, after leaving the church, it was like not so big of an issue. And I thought that I could do this, and like fucking it up 2 days before, I felt horrible. Yeah. And you made it a safe place. And, that was just really impactful for me. I felt a shift inside of like, it's safe to tell her, but I still messed up. There's still a lot of messing up that happened after that. But that was like really impactful for me. I don't know if you recognize just how like big that was for me, but yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, when I think about how our relationship has been able to navigate things like lying, I think that I was able to have some empathy for it because like I was a child that lied.
Yeah.
My parents were really strict and critical. And so I learned that the only way to be safe was to lie, because if I was myself, I would get in trouble, or I'd get grounded, or I'd get spanked, Yeah. And so when I could see you lying throughout our relationship, I think I felt a lot of compassion for it, because what I understood about your lying was that it was some form of self-preservation.
Yeah.
Because even though I had worked on that and wasn't currently struggling with a lying problem and in our relationship, I was able to understand that you're not lying because you hate me, or because you're trying to hurt me, or because you want to take me on this wild goose chase. I understood that you were lying because underneath that lie was a really scared little boy.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true for most people.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's some sociopaths out there, but we're not talking about those people. We're talking about, your average Joe, narcissist, wounded child. It's like on the inside, there is just someone deeply in need of self-acceptance. And I understood that I needed to get underneath the lie or behind the lie. Because if you attack the lie itself, you'll never get to it, because narcissists have such a strong shame response that when you grab at the lie itself, then there's a huge reaction. There's even more justification. There's more guards. There's more trying to hide proof of the original event. And I think that's where loved ones of narcissists get so fatigued. They get so much compassion fatigue because they receive those trickle truths, or they receive those half truths, or those justifications, and then they believe them, and then they come up against another lie. And I think that the reason why it continues to be a chronic issue is because lying, it's not the lying that's the issue. Like the behavior itself is indicative of a deeper thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, lying is a symptom.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, if you want to try and address the symptom, you can, but that symptom's just going to keep popping up in other areas of your life.
Well, and I think that's why you were really wise, and you were so persistent on the pornography thing. It's like, it actually wasn't driving like a massive wedge between us, the actual pornography, but the lie behind it. And you knew, if I pull that string long enough, and if Jordan gets to a stage in his life where he's stressed enough and doesn't have this figured out, he's going to act out, because he's using pornography as a way to cope with other things. And so what does this lead to? And for the narcissist, what can happen is, it's like when you lie, you put up it's like you put up this little teeny mask, but it's only like 1 degree different than who you are. It's like, I looked at this thing, but she doesn't think I did. So she's loving this version of me, and now I did it again. And so now it's 2% different than who I really am. And the thing is, it gets bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden you got this massive gap between who she thinks you are and who you're leading yourself on to be. And what that creates is that you feel even less love. because you know that they're loving the fake version of you, and the mask is the real thing. If they only saw the mask, you know, they would leave you. And it makes it so much bigger, because at this point you're now 30 lies deep on something. And if I tell her now, what's this massive thing that I've done?
Yeah.
You know, and that's how insidious it is. And that's something that I noticed. Like, I remember as, like, at first it was like, I would wait a few weeks to tell you and about a pornography mess up. And it was like, I had all these justifications that I lied to myself. And this was a great training ground for me to learn honesty, honestly, because I learned in all the ways I self-deceive. Well, I can't tell her right now. That'll bother her. You know, she doesn't need to know that because I didn't really mess up. You know, that one doesn't count because it was this, or because it was, you know, I had all these things. And, you know, the lie started, you know, it took me 2 weeks and whatever to tell you. And then it was like, it took me a day to tell you. And then it was like hours. And then it was immediately, you know, and like the infractions got less and less significant as well, the actual act. And,
well, I want to hop in right there.
Yeah, jump in.
Before you go too much farther, because I think this brings up the question, you know, how do you basically help a narcissist stop lying? Because this is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You're saying that you went from lying your whole life to lying to me to now where, you know, we haven't dealt with a lying problem for quite some time.
Yeah.
And I think that the antidote to that was creating a safe place for the truth. And I'll tell you what a safe place for the truth looks like.
Yeah.
Going back to my earlier comment about how narcissists feel deeply embedded shame and how lies are protecting them from feeling the shame underneath the surface, or the shame about what the truth is. So in order to create a safe place for the truth, we in essence have to consider how our reaction is either going to elicit shame or elicit love and compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
And so, like I was saying earlier, because I had an experience of, you know, my parents not understanding how their ginormous reactions to my lies and punishing me even more, or criticizing me even more, only caused me to lie even more as a child and a teenager. You know, I was a rebellious teenager, so I was like, hey, I already know where this is going to go. If I call you out for a lie and sit you down and tell you you're in trouble and tell you we're not having sex until you quit lying to me or whatever, like, that's just going to backfire, because all that's going to do is help you become a better liar.
Yeah.
Because you're going to say, great, now I just need to get better at lying.
Yeah.
Because this is a truly unsafe place for the truth.
I mean, these ultimatums are the worst at this, right? It's like,
Yeah.
if you fuck up again, you, like, I'm gone. It's like, okay, cool.
That's so much
no way I'm
pressure.
going to tell her, you know?
Yeah, and so that's where I created this mental game of, like, how do I create a safe place for the truth? And the reality was that, like I was saying earlier, needing to get behind the lie, and it actually takes a lot of resilience, emotional resilience on the behalf of the person holding that space, because it's hard not to take that personally.
Yeah.
You know, somebody asked, were you compassionate or did you feel betrayed? The reality is both.
Yeah.
I felt compassionate and I felt super betrayed. But I needed to understand that me reacting from the place of the betrayal will only deepen the shame response. And so it was a little bit of holding space for the truth to be safe and working on regulating myself so that you didn't have to receive the full spectrum of my reaction.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you would come to me and say something like, hey, babe, you know, I lied to you about this and I need to tell you, just to model what that reaction looks like, it's a lot like, you know, not lying about how I'm feeling, but saying like, wow, I need a minute because hearing that is hard, but I'm really grateful you told me, and that was really vulnerable, and thank you. So I want to respond in the most loving way. And I would take a break. You know,
Yeah.
I remember we had one conversation. It might have been that one of the ones you're talking about. We were talking in the kitchen, and I just said, I need a minute.
Yeah.
And I just sat quietly.
Yeah. My heart's like breaking. I'm
Yeah.
like, I hurt her.
Yeah,
You
at
know?
that point you had done a lot of work to let your heart break with me. And, you know, that wasn't as easy early on.
Yeah.
But I think that when I came back and I said, I'm really proud of you for telling me the truth, and I want to work on this with you. Let's make a plan. And it was just very matter of fact. Like,
Yeah.
thank you for telling me. I love you for telling me. I'm so proud of you for telling me. This must have been really hard and really scary. Let's make a plan how not to do this again. And it's interesting because we were just reading our journals from earlier this year and processing a lot of what we've been through together. And it was interesting to see how, through the years in my journals, I'm saying, I'm so heartbroken. I feel so betrayed. I am depressed. I can't get out of bed today. This is too much. I feel so insecure about myself. I feel so unloved. And his journals are like, this was great.
No, but
I'm just kidding.
It was like, wow, I can't believe she held such beautiful space for me. Like she was so good, and I've never had that before. But I was unaware of just how much your heart was broken until months later when you were like, yeah, that wrecked me. Or probably not months later, and then reading our journals like, oh, yeah.
Reminders.
Yeah, reminders.
Yeah.
Actually, this brings up a really good point. I think the last thing that I want is that a bunch of loved ones of narcissists just let themselves get walked all over and hurt themselves through this process. What advice would you give on how to thread that needle correctly? It's like, don't go too far to the left of shaming them, but also don't go too far to the right of letting them ruin your life and making them feel that it's okay.
Yeah.
Enabling. Yeah. How would you put that?
So it is a little bit of a fine line, because if you are compassionate without firmness and boundaries, then you're enabling. Yeah. So if I was to say, hey, thank you for telling me, no biggie, it's all good, just don't do it again, like slap on the hand. Yeah. That's kind of enabling, because you're like, oh, that wasn't that big of an ouchie.
That's a line itself to say you're fine, I'm good. Like that, you're not being brave, you're not being a good soldier by lying. I think that's enablement.
Yeah, if you're enabling the behavior by saying it's okay, like
when it's not.
The truth is that it's not okay.
Yeah, the truth is it hurts.
And on the other side, if you're too firm without any compassion, where you're saying you're a horrible person and I knew you were a horrible, lying, cheating narcissist, that's also creating a problem where it becomes an unsafe place for the truth and it can perpetuate the lie. And it's not the responsibility of the loved one to do this. And this is always the disclaimer that we put out there. This is for the niche group of people who have a narcissistic partner who is healing and aware and trying to work on their stuff, and you want to be a support for them. What I've learned is that just like parenting or any other healthy relationship dynamic, you need to be both kind and firm.
Yeah.
And so we were just speaking about the kindness piece, where you don't want to elicit deeper shame and make it an unsafe place to heal and tell the truth. But on the other side, you don't want to enable that behavior. And so I did set firm boundaries where I said, I do not want you to look at pornography, because I think that you have an addiction, and you, just like an alcoholic, you can't be in the bar when you've had a drinking problem. So I just want you to get away from it, right? I was like, I want you to get away from the pornography. It doesn't feel like a good relationship dynamic. And if you do, just know that, like, I do not want a relationship with someone who's addicted to pornography. Like, that doesn't honor me. It doesn't make me feel respected. And I think we set a date for it where we said, like, in 6 months' time, I need you to have gone to therapy, gotten adequate help. And then the last thing was, you have to tell me when you mess up. Like, you can't lie to me, basically.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to be perfect, but if you keep lying to me, then that is my boundary. Like, I will not be in a relationship where you're lying. That doesn't mean that the next lie I'm out, but it means that, I'll give you a certain amount of time to really work on this and display that you're trying, without being like, hey, there's no space for you to work on this. So I think, I don't know, what would you say, babe?
Yeah.
You think I'm capturing that well?
I think you are. I think one other thing I'd like to point out is that you did a really fantastic job of displaying your hurt, of talking about your pain without making it a criticism. So you did really good at saying, whoa, I just feel so hurt from this. And I just feel like I feel really small. I feel like not enough. I feel like I'm not attractive. And I feel like I don't matter to you. And so Sorry, you might not have said that last one. That last one's borderlining like criticism, but you just talked about you, how you feel. Versus it's really easy to accidentally say, I feel like you are just manipulating me. I feel that you are not safe. I feel, and those might be still things you are feeling, but it's still directed at the other person in such a way that can make their defenses flare up, right?
Yeah.
And make them, either shame spiral or feel the need to get angry, like say that's not true. I'm not doing those things, And I just feel like focusing on your pain was really helpful for me. And you also just you honored your body and listened to yourself. I remember like that night or like days and weeks later, you're just like, and I'm like trying to snuggle up to you and you're just like, I'm sorry. I honestly just still feel like my body's not feeling it. Like you weren't punishing me, but you were just connected with what your body needed. And that was some space for me, or like not having sex or whatever it was at the time.
Yeah.
And it helped me actually understand, because another thing that narcissists can do is like, you want to just forget the fact that you messed up. You want to just like put that in the back. And so I think sometimes I was a little too quick to be like, all right, baby, let's snuggle and let's kiss and let's, and you're just like, I'm still hurt.
Yeah, I think that's what I would call like allowing natural consequences.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes people get very heady about it. And, this will happen when we're chatting with the girls. The girls are like, tell him you'll never fuck him again. Do that. Then he'll stop. It's like, but that's kind of manipulative and it's cruel, really, at the end of the day. And I know when it feels like, well, they lied to me and were cruel, so I'm going to be cruel back. But the reality is that like there are natural consequences in a connection to when you do something that fractures trust, like lying. And all I would ever do is allow the natural consequence, which was, I don't feel safe with you. When you lie to me, my body doesn't feel safe, so I can't go into these intimate places with you when I'm not feeling safe with you. And you need to rebuild my trust before I can. But I'm working on, forgiveness, and I'm working on trust too. And I think the most important thing at the end of the day is to get on the same page and realize it's not me against you. It's not like me against my lying narcissist partner. It's you and me against the thing.
Yeah.
Right? So it's getting on the same team and saying you and me together are slaying this dragon of the automatic compulsion to lie.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, focusing on the most important thing being to repair the connection and maintain the connection. And so when you do things like focus on the lies, or focus on like how I need to get back at you, or focus on how you can get away from accountability with what you've done, all of those things are not focused on the connection.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think in everything, always like recentering on the connection itself and saying like, at all costs, the most important thing between us is our connection. And so you and me need to be on the same page and slay this dragon of lying and fear of telling the truth together.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that by setting healthy boundaries, by addressing when what you've done has hurt me, and be honest and truthful about how much it has hurt me, and allowing the natural consequences, while also being empathetic and compassionate about the fact that this is a program that you've been running since you were a kid.
Yeah.
It's an automation that you have to lie for self-preservation, and it's not a personal attack against me. And so that's where I think that like work on myself has been really important as well, because in order for me not to react and personalize and beat myself up, I had to go sit on my Zen pillow and take a lot of deep breaths and say, this lying is not about me.
Yeah.
And I love myself too much to allow you to keep lying, but I love you enough to give you the space to try and heal and tell the truth.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That is so beautiful. The one thing as well that I remember always happening was, I loved how you said it was us against the thing. One thing that would always happen is I would actually keep thinking that you were shaming me or attacking. My shame response is so sensitive that the simplest things, I'd be like, oh, I'm the worst. And you'd be like, I'm not shaming you. I'm not shaming you. I don't think you're the worst, but I do need you to like look at this with me. it's me and you against the thing. Like, you actually had to remind me of that a lot. And that's probably something that occurs a lot with others.
Yeah, I would recommend trying that one, because we would get in these talks where you'd start to get really defensive or angry about the conversation about the lie. And I'd have to stop and say, baby, this is not me against you attacking you. This is me trying to get on the same page with you and deal with the thing.
It's so hard to believe when you're the narcissist. You would say that and I'd be like, that's a lie. She's manipulating me. Like, in my mind, everyone's lying all the time. I'm just one of the many, and yeah, it's such a bizarre perspective to have. You bring something up. I feel like a lot of people might be watching this and be like, my narcissist doesn't act that way. My narcissist gets super defensive and, freaks out. One thing that I think broke down our walls was we had this kind of mantra of like, if you notice yourself getting defensive, get curious instead, or getting angry, get curious instead. And it was almost like this signal for us to be, I'd get angry and defensive and you'd be like, baby, you're getting defensive right now. Like, let's have this conversation and ready to not be defensive. And sometimes it'd be a wake up call where I'd be like, oh shoot, like, she's right. Like, there's something here. If I'm getting this defensive, like, I should, wake up. And other times I'd get more pissed, but more and more we got to this point where I would be able to listen. But that was a really good little hack for us to be able to point out, hey, you're being defensive. Let's not talk about this until you're ready to talk.
Yeah, I think that kind of answers the question, like, how do you approach the conversation with your narcissistic partner about a lying problem? And I think the answer to that question is self-awareness is the first step. And so you can't force self-awareness upon someone else. And if you try, it'll feel like an attack.
Yeah.
But curiosity is always your most powerful tool, because curiosity is non-judgmental. There's no strings attached, there's no ultimatums attached. Curiosity is very playful and lighthearted. And so I think that when we get curious together and we say, oh, I've noticed you said this, and, but this is something we experienced, like, what happened there?
Yeah.
It's very non-judgmental. It's not like, hey, I notice you lie a lot and what's your problem? It's like, hey, I noticed this thing going on and should we just be curious? And I think over time, if someone is on the path of becoming self-aware, curiosity is a really gentle way to help them get going on that path. Yeah. And so, there are some people who aren't close to being self-aware, and that's not something you can force. And in that situation, the things we've talked about in this video might not be super helpful. But I think that if a narcissistic person is on the path to self-awareness, getting curious, being step one, step two being creating a safe place for the truth to come out with using compassion and empathy. And then the third thing being to set firm but kind boundaries. The fourth thing, to be vulnerable about your emotions and allowing them to see the hurt that their lies cause without being judgmental, blaming, or aggressive or attacking. And then the final thing, just being willing to be a team, saying it's you and me against the lie, and helping them feel safe to tackle that dragon together. And then the last thing I would say is always self-care, because if you're the loved one of a narcissist, then, you've got a lot of work on your plate and a lot to do on your hands, and you got to make sure you're prioritizing your own self-care. You can't let this swallow you up. So, take more time away from those conflicts and those challenging things to get out with the girls, to sit down and meditate, to take yourself to the Pilates, to the gym, on hikes, do things that light you up and help you get strong and resilient in yourself, and, recentering on that intuition, that higher self that guides you. Yeah. And I would love to hear from you. Like, what do you think are the takeaways for the narcissists that are watching this video?
Yeah, I was actually
dealing with lying.
Just about to get into that. I think, we can never truly experience love, self-love to ourselves or loves from others when we lie. And our lies show us where we don't love ourselves. It shows us where our shame exists. And so while lying is this frustrating thing, it's also a tool to help you figure out where you need healing. The fact that I'm lying about pornography shows that I have sexual shame, and it can show us where we have our issues. And so one of the most beautiful experiences that we had was one night. I had a psychedelic journey where I saw what a liar I had been. And I went up to Kira and I told her, here's everything I've never told anyone my entire life. And I started at like childhood. Like, here's all of it. And I was like, take a seat. We got a long conversation. We were up all night that night. And I shared it all. And what was absolutely amazing about that experience, well, some of it was very hurtful and you felt like, whoa, who did I move in with? Because I didn't know a lot of these things. We also bonded very, very hard from that. Like, to have her look at me in all of my mess and say, whoa, that's messy, but I still love you. I still see that, was one of the most healing things I'd ever experienced. And you shared with me a bunch of things you had never shared with anybody. And we really like connected over that. And, you know, if you're a narcissist out there, that might be a really overwhelming thing to do. Maybe start small, but at some point, I will tell you one of the most beautiful things that you can do is go to your partner and say, here's everything I've ever lied about, and watch them show up for you, you know? And until you're ready to get there, start with the little things. Notice all the little teeny ways that you lie. I will lie about things and say, no, it cost this much. And then I'll have to pause and be like, that's actually not true. It costs this much. I don't know why I said that. I just lied.
That's what we do now. Little moments of that.
Yeah, exactly. And like those automation, it's really hard to break the habit of lying, but you can be a little bit playful with it. And when you notice it, just get better and better at honing it in, because being more honest allows you to be more authentic. And when you can be more authentic, you can actually love yourself and you can actually let other people love you. So much stems from lying and is so crucial to the healing journey of a narcissist that we wanted to go super deep on this today. So that's all I got. Do you have anything else, baby?
No.
That's all. Well, we hope this was helpful to somebody out there. If you've got questions, you can comment on them below or join our group and we will answer your questions as well. Hopefully this is helpful to somebody. See ya.